look at how to create kinetic typography in Motion 5. For those of you that don't know, kinetic typography is a style of animation where text is used and animated to give it a more lively feel, often by having a camera zooming around all the words on screen, and that way you can introduce your message, whatever that may be, in a more exciting, vibrant and eye-catching way. Kinetic typography is used for a variety of things, such as informational videos online, corporate videos, idents, and advertisements on TV. So in this episode we're going to create a very simple kinetic typography animation, such as the one we see here. Okay, so I've got before me just a blank Motion 5 project with nothing in. We can see there's nothing going on here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create the text for it, and we're going to use the text tool down the bottom here if you hover your mouse over it. And we're also going to need to use, from time to time, the select and transform tool. So first of all, select the text tool and drag out a text box up at the top, and I'm just going to write kinetic in there, and then I'm just going to select the paintbrush tool. I just need to keep going back to the text tool because I'm going to write out all of my words, one box per word. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. And there we go. So I've got kinetic typography is cool in Motion 5. So I've got my text there, but it's very, very boring. So I'm just going to hover my mouse over the select and transform tool, and I'm just going to use this to position where everything's going to be on the screen. And I'm only going to do that very roughly for now because what I need to do is resize all of this text anyway. So first of all, let's select our first text box up here, which is the word kinetic. Reselect your text tool by pressing T on the keyboard, and we're going to bring up the HUD. Now the HUD stands for heads up display, and you can find it down by the timeline next to the camera icon down here. If we click this black box here as the HUD, it brings up the HUD. We could also go into the inspector itself to have a look at the text select options. So first of all, we've got several options here in the HUD. We've got the opacity, which is a slider bar, and we see if we move the opacity up and down, Connect becomes more or less see-through. That's what opacity is, the transparency. The blend mode, which is how this particular layer interacts with layers beneath it. We've got options for the text here. We've got normal as our selected, but we could select any of these if we wanted as kind of preset text styles. We've got the font here. Jungle is what I've currently got selected, whether it's regular, bold or italic in this drop down menu. Obviously Jungle is only regular. And then we've got text alignment tools here, the colour tool there for colouring the text and changing the colour, and the size of the text, tracking the distance between each letter and the distance between lines. So first thing I'm going to do is I want to change the colour of the word kinetic, so I'm going to select my text there, and I'm just going to click the little drop down menu and use the pipette tool to set the colour that I want there. And do exactly the same with typography. And you see it's very quick and easy to change the colour of your text itself. So there we go. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to reselect kinetic, and I'm going to start to change the size of my text using the size slider bar here. Now you see one problem that's come up here is the word typography. As I've changed the size, it's got so big that it can't sit in the text box and the Y has disappeared onto the line below. If you have this problem, make sure you've got the text select tool selected, and then simply resize your text box. I'm just going to, there we go. And I'm just going to use the move tool to reposition all these words. around. So I'm just using the move tool, which is down here, the little arrow tool, to select the words. I'm just moving them back on my screen to just rearrange them so that they look a little bit nicer. And I'm going to resize this text box here so I can get to the word in. There we go, and that in looks a little bit small to me, so I'm going to make it a bit bigger. There we go. So we've now got some text on screen. We've got it different colours and different sizes. I'm going to change just one of the fonts or two of the fonts and just make it a little bit different. There we go. I don't think anyone's ever accused Hobo Standard of being a cool font. Well, it is literally cool now. And I'm even going to choose one of these for my options there. I'll just increase the size of the word motion 5. So we've got our text arranged on the screen. And it doesn't look perfect, but it doesn't have to for this tutorial. But at the minute, it's just typography, it's just text, it's not actually kinetic, it's not doing anything, you know, that word kinetic, movement, life, doing things. So what we need to do is add that in. So to do that, we're going to introduce a camera to the scene, and this camera is going to track all around the words and have a look at them. So to add the camera, we need to go down to our timeline, and there's a little camera icon here, and if you have your mouse over it, it says create a camera, give that a click. And it will give the option to select a 2D or 3D camera. We want a 3D camera. Now, this has actually changed our project now from being a two-dimensional project to a 3D project. And you'll see that it's come up with a couple more things on the viewer up the top. In the top left, we've got a little drop-down menu where we can select what view of the scene we want, whether it's through the active camera, through the camera's lens, or to look at it through the left, or to look at it through the right. We've got the perspective viewpoint where we can kind of pan all around our project here. We've got left and right views, and the one we want is going to be active camera, and that's what we're going to use ourselves in this one. So with active camera selected, on the top right we can see we've got a little camera icon, and we've got 3 more icons here. These are for move or pan camera, orbit camera, and dolly camera. I'm going to talk you through these now. The dolly camera tool moves you further away or closer to your object, and we do this by hovering our mouse over the icon, clicking and holding down, and without letting go, moving your mouse. So there's our dolly, like a dolly in the film industry, a movable car. We've got our pan, which enables us to go left, right, up or down, and in the centre we've got orbit, which allows us to move around the word and get the words and get a different perspective on them. So it's these tools that we're going to use to make the video a bit more interesting and to kind of zoom around from word to word. So first of all, let's do that. What we're going to do, we're going to reset our camera. If I go into my camera settings in the inspector over here, to reset to what it was originally, we've got the little reset button under camera controls. Give that a click. Oh, camera transform properties even. Now camera controls under properties. Now, first of all, let's pick what our opening shot's going to be. We want to zoom in on the word kinetic. So I'm going to move my camera using the pan tool to line kinetic up in the centre of the screen. What we need to do is, much like a real camera, we need to hit the record button to record our movements. So the record button is this little red button here. I'm going to start recording. This is going to essentially keyframe the camera's movements and animation for me automatically based on what I do. And it's going to work in conjunction with the timeline down here. So ensure that your timeline slider is set to the first frame. So drag that along to the first frame. Click the record button. Then we're going to drag it along to 30 frames, which is going to be 1 second in. Or we might do 2 seconds actually. And then with the timeline slider along at 60 frames, which is 2 seconds, we're then going to dolly in. and pan in. Then I'm going to move along again to another 2 seconds further down at 120 frames. And I'm going to recenter it on typography and dot it back out. Then I'm going to move my timeline slider on another 2 seconds to 180 frames. I'm going to use my pan tool to recenter on is and to zoom in. I'm also going to orbit around this time and then pan back around. Then I'm going to move another 2 seconds along, and I'm going to repeat this process now. And finally, the last 2 seconds, I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to recenter on motion 5. And if I hit stop on the record button there, what we see now that I've stopped recording, if I move my timeline slider along to the beginning and press play, and there we go. So it's working slightly. What we need to do now is we need to go through and just recenter a couple of those points. So I think this is when I did the orbit tool, it's kind of messed it up. So I'm going to re-hit record. I'm going to recenter on there. And likewise, move along to there. Recenter on typography. I'm happy with it is. The cool looks fine. And motion 5 looks fine as well. So, just a couple of things to smooth out there, and that was all because I didn't select the orbit tool for the first keyframe and second keyframe, so it's slowly keyframe them. So let's watch this back. So this is our animation playing in real time, kinetic typography. Okay, so there we go, very, very simple kinetic typography for us there. If we want to make this a bit more interesting, we can also change the background colours and animate these different text coming in. I'm going to add in a rectangle solid now using the rectangle tool here, but I'm going to zoom out to 25%. So I'm going to select the rectangle tool and I'm going to drag out. And then with that rectangle tool, in my layers menu down here, I'm going to move it to the bottom layer there. There we go. And now I've got a nice white background. And we can do a lot of other stuff with this now. Now we've got the basic camera movements on and stuff. So we can, first of all, we can make sure that we can't see all the text at first. So what we can do is we can introduce it very gradually on the timeline down here. So on the timeline we can see we've got kinetic down the bottom. What we want to do is click typography is cool in motion 5. Select all those layers by holding down the shift key on your keyboard as you click them. And we want to drag them out of the way. So at first we've only got kinetic, and then we want typography to come in about there. So then we'll move typography along a little bit, and we'll select all the others and move them. And we're just introducing them one word at a time. So kinetic first, then it starts to pan out, and typography comes in there. And then is will have come in a little bit later, and we start to just gradually increase them one at a time. So we can see how I've staggered them all out there on the timeline. So let's watch this again. I'm also going to take the grid view off because that's quite distracting. So take off 3D grid. There we go. Now we've got one more problem obviously down here, is the project ends right on 300. So what we would need to do is we would need to increase our project's length here. So we can quickly and easily do that if we want. There we go, so and then drag that out there. There we go, that's better. So for those who missed that, I just clicked Show Project Duration, hover your mouse over the frames and then click and drag up to increase the frames, and then you need to set the out point using this slider bar here to be further along. So let's introduce the word kinetic a bit later as well. I'm going to start on the white screen. And I think as well, looking at it, there's a bit where the camera kind of moves and then stops and changes direction. I think that's when we'll introduce the is. There we go. And likewise with the cool as well. There we go. Now the blacks come in because I've increased my project duration, so I just need to increase the rectangle's duration as well by hovering over the end. So we can also, if we wanted to, we could add in, using the library, some kind of text animations if we wanted to. If we go to here we go. So in behaviors, text animation, text sequence, and we can add these to our text layers as well. So we could select one. So let's drag that onto kinetic. And we could add a couple of these. I'm just going to go for some crazy ones. Doesn't really matter what I'm doing in terms of the animations. Obviously you guys will do much more interesting and well thought out than I am. So I've added very simple animation to all of these. So now let's play this kinetic typography. There we go, a very simple kinetic typography piece, but relatively easy to do in Motion 5. Obviously yours will look much more polished than my quick 10-minute one. So thank you for watching, good luck. Remember to use the 3D camera, and remember to think about your timings of when different objects come in.